that, certainly we'll welcome anyone that joins later. But this is our breakout session to discuss the presidential proclamations and the travel bans. My name is Mike Wooley. I'm a partner here at Warner. I've been practicing immigration law for over 20 years, and I'm happy to have you with me today. I enjoy presenting, I must say, doing it over Zoom, and just seeing all of your names and none of your faces is an odd situation. So I hope you can hear me all right. There's a few of us enough to, I'd like to make this presentation as interactive as you would like. So during the course of the presentation, please don't hesitate to ask me any questions. Just take yourself off of mute, and if you have a question, chances are others would have a question as well. Also, there's a chat function if time allows. I'd prefer to respond to verbal questions first, of course, and then after the session or at the appropriate time during it. If the chat questions are there, I'll do my best to address those. And other than that, if we have any time left over, I'd certainly like to open it up and maybe just have a round table function. I'm not sure how well that works on Zoom these days, but, just an open question and answer period. So, it doesn't even have to be employment-based immigration. We can try to play Stump the Lawyer and see if I can help you out with any just general immigration questions. But today, as you know, we're going to discuss the various travel bans that are in force, and we're going to look at this from a perspective of foreign employees that you may have that may need to travel for job-related reasons, could be family reasons, but in any event, may have a desire to travel, and to try to help you evaluate the extent to which that may or may not be feasible as far as that employee being to re-enter the United States and resume work for you. So the travel bans are basically broken down into four types. So we have what I refer to as the country-specific travel bans. Then we have the land border travel bans. After that, we have what I call the foreign worker travel bans. And then finally, we have the visa processing travel bans. These bans are not mutually exclusive. There is a bit of conflict and certainly complex interplay between the regulations and the various orders on the ground that can change rapidly as far as their enforcement. And so it does result in a rather complex situation. So in order to try to deal with that, to treat the issue exhaustively would probably take an entire day. So I've tried just to boil down these travel bans into their essence, if you will. With any other aspect of law, there's a myriad of exceptions to the rule. On these travel bans, the exceptions do vary, but there's sort of a general body of exceptions that sort of flows through all of them. So we'll discuss those as well. And as I say, at any point in time, if you have any questions, I'd be very happy to deal with those. So the very first travel bans that we have that came into play are the country-specific travel bans. And as you know, the underlying current and theme to all of these is the national health impact of the COVID-19 virus and protection of the health of the United States population. So the country-specific travel bans were the first to come out, the very first was China, and that was in late January of this year, and that was Presidential Proclamation 9984. From January through late May, there were several other presidential proclamations extending through Proclamation 10041, adding on various other countries. So in late February, Iran was added to the country-specific ban. Then in mid-March, the Schengen area countries were added. Those are 26 countries in one fell swoop. It's basically most of Western Europe. Shortly thereafter, just a couple of days later, were added the United Kingdom and Ireland. And there was a brief hiatus until late May, in which Brazil was added. And then no countries have been added since. But that's a total of 31 countries. So what is that country-specific travel ban? Basically, those travel bans say that any immigrant or non-immigrant visa holder who has been in any of these 31 countries for within 14 days of the time they try to apply to enter the United States, attempt to enter, then they are prohibited absolutely from entering the United States. So basically, if you have an employee that's been in any one of these 31 countries, they then have to go somewhere else for a period of 14 days, quarantining themselves, if you will, before they can enter the United States. And that may be something that's extremely difficult to do, depending upon what the entry requirements are for whatever that other country is. It's a very difficult situation, and travel needs to be planned accordingly. Now, it's important to note that, again, there's no expiration date to this. With most of the travel bans, there's expiration dates which then get extended. However, here, there's no expiration date, and this will just remain the course until the president rescinds the proclamations. Good news is that this travel ban does not apply to US citizens. It does not apply to green card holders. We should probably discuss for a moment, okay, what is the difference between an immigrant and a green card holder? Well, a green card holder is someone who's already been admitted into the United States in a permanent residency capacity. So they've gone through the entire process, which can take from months to years, and were either issued a immigrant visa abroad or changed their status within the United States and were issued a green card. An immigrant is someone who at most, certainly at least, let's say, has a desire to remain permanently in the United States, and at most has been issued an immigrant visa, but has not yet applied for entry to the United States and been granted permanent residency status. So to recap, the country-specific travel bans don't apply to US citizens, don't apply to green card holders, and it does not apply to close family members of the United States citizens and green card holders. So close family members, we'd be talking parents, spouses, children, and even siblings. Also, which would be some of the general theme of exceptions to all these rules, the people who are determined whose entry is in the interest of the United States government. So you have airline crew personnel, diplomats, armed forces folks, and importantly, anyone who's deemed to be entering the United States to engage in COVID-19 virus containment or mitigation. So healthcare workers, researchers involved in medical research. So that is the first travel ban, the country-specific travel bans. The next one, which is a rather easy one to understand of all of the four, is our land border travel bans. So this travel ban uh, has to do only with our land borders, which is, of course, Canada to the north, Mexico to the south. Um, that came into force mid-March and has been extended monthly since then. And it was recently extended again. So we know that this will remain the case until the end of this month, October 21st, and in all likelihood will be extended again. So we don't know when this situation will end, just need to monitor it. And what the land border travel ban says is that only essential personnel can enter the United States. And that has been deemed to be, of course, people important to the entry into the United States of fuel, medicine, commercial goods. So your cross-border truckers are allowed in and out. And then in addition to that, students who are coming to study in the United States, workers who have already been granted work authorization are deemed essential. That's determined on a case-by-case basis by CBP at the northern and southern border. Certainly, if you're involved in medical activities, you clearly would be let in. But what we've been seeing is basically anyone that has prior work authorization that's still valid is allowed in. Of course, they cannot have been, even though they're in Canada, if within 14 days prior to that attempt to cross the Canadian or Mexican border, if they've been to one of the 31 prohibited countries, they're still not going to get in. They're going to have to wait for the 14 days. And again, armed forces personnel, diplomats, folks of that nature. So what is non-essential travel? Who are those that can't enter the United States by land from Mexico or Canada? And it's basically just folks that have a valid visa or are exempt from a visa, but are entering for purposes of tourism, recreation, or to attend cultural events. So those folks aren't getting in. And it's important also to note that this ban does not apply to air travel. So if you had a valid visitor visa and were not coming from one of the 31 prohibited countries, you could enter the United States for tourism, recreation, or to attend a cultural event. You just can't do it by land. Also, you could enter by sea, although that's very restrictive given the cruise ships that are non-operational and things of that matter. But so basically, if you come in by air, which is the majority way, you are not subject to the land border travel ban. The next travel bans that we have are the foreign worker bans. And this started in late April, and Presidential Proclamation 10-014 was issued, and it prohibited the entrance of immigrants into the United States. And so basically, we've spoken about what is an immigrant: someone who wants to permanently reside in the United States and may even have an immigrant visa to do so. But if you were outside the United States at the time of the proclamation and did not have a valid travel document, let's say you were scheduled to have an immigrant visa interview a couple of days after the proclamation, well, at that point, you were out of luck and could not enter the United States. As always, there's a myriad of exceptions. And again, through the general theme, if you are a green card holder, you could enter the United States. If you're a US citizen, you can enter the United States. And they were also allowing spouses of United States citizens to enter. So that could be someone applying again for an immigrant visa. But if it was issued on the basis of being a spouse of a U.S. citizen, you could continue with that process and still come over. However, importantly, if you were the spouse of a green card holder, then you could not continue that process. And so, and those procedures can often take many months or many years, depending on where a person is from. And that just, this would again just be another layer of delay. Again, folks in the national interest could enter the country. If you were here already in the United States when the proclamation came into play, then you're okay. Again, this was an immigrants only proclamation, so you could still enter as a non-immigrant, say an H-1B holder, a J-1, an L visa holder, intercompany transfers from multinational companies, an E visa holder. Those folks could all come in. This only stopped the entry of immigrants. If you were in the United States and moving towards from a non-immigrant status to permanent residency, you were not affected by this. It was just folks on the outside trying to get in. Then, about 2 months later, in late June, Proclamation 10052 was issued by the president, and that extended the length of the immigrant travel ban, which initially was only for 60 days. It extended it out through the remainder of this year. So it's in effect until the end of December and can be further extended from there. We'll just have to wait and see. But importantly, beyond extending it temporally, it also extended it to certain non-immigrant visa holders. So it prohibited the entry, and there are exceptions, but it prohibited the entry of H-1B visa holders, prohibited the entry of H-2B visa holders, prohibited the entry of J-1 visa holders, and L visa holders. So those three visa categories are probably the lion's share of business non-immigrant visa holders. There's of course the e-visa for investors. There's a bit of a theme that runs through these travel bans that does allow for the entry of investment, perhaps not per se, but there's various national interest exceptions that one can apply for. And also the spouses and dependent children of these H-1B visa holders, J-1s and Ls, could not come in either and still can't. So for example, let's say you have a worker who's been working for you for years in H-1B status. You've been filing with USCIS, been getting approval notices, everything's fine for that worker while they stay in the United States. But let's say their H-1B visa was expired. You don't need a visa to be in the United States. It just allows you to ask to re-enter once you leave. It's USCIS's approval notices that govern the legality of your stay while you're in the United States. So consequently, let's say this worker's been with you for years, hasn't renewed their visa because they haven't traveled or didn't feel the need to. Now, if they were to go abroad and were to try to apply for a visa, which we'll see under the consular processing, but probably wouldn't get anyway. But nonetheless, even if they got one, they could not come back under the foreign worker travel ban. Again, some exceptions to this. It doesn't apply to non-listed non-immigrant workers. So anybody who's not an H, J, or an L can come in on a non-immigrant visa. Also, food supply workers, people deemed to be in the national interest, medical care, medical research, high-level executives, diplomats, armed forces folks, those people can still get in, and people who have otherwise have a valid travel document other than an H, J, or L visa. So this could be advanced parole, could be reentry permit, something of the sort. Um, we should note that just recently, earlier this week, uh, the portion of Presidential Proclamation 10052 that pertains to the suspension of entry of H, J, and L non-immigrants has been enjoined. The case was the Association of Manufacturers versus the Department of Homeland Security. It's still pending in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California, but a preliminary injunction was issued by that court that went into effect just October 1st that says, hey, you need to allow in people in H, J, and L status and issue them visas. Now, as we'll talk about next, that's all well and good if consulates are issuing visas instead of being closed due to COVID. So this injunction certainly is not a panacea of relief for anyone. There may be a few people who are able to benefit it, but it's certainly no great remedy. So on to the consular processing, visa processing travel ban. Back in March, when COVID became a large concern for the U.S., abroad, the U.S. Department of State basically closed all of its U.S. embassies and consulates on a worldwide basis. There were some limited openings for U.S. citizens that needed assistance, but basically visa processing was shut down. There was some allowance for some emergency appointments, but basically visa issuance just shut down on a worldwide basis, and that's very significant. The U.S. has 169 diplomatic missions throughout the world, so those are basically embassies. And many embassies have one or more consulates, depending on the size of the country they're in. Not all of those facilities issue visas, but most do. So you're talking hundreds of locations throughout the world where people are accustomed to getting visas, just weren't giving them anymore. That went on until about the middle of July. And at that point, the Department of State announced that it was going to initiate a phased in resumption of routine visa services. So what's a routine visa service? Certainly issuance of work visas and immigrant visas, but of course, your standard B visitors visas and all the other flavors of visa. However, this has been an extremely slow process. It depends on the facts on the ground in any particular jurisdiction as far as what that embassy or consulate feels is the particular threat of COVID to its employees and possibly some other concerns, but primarily how they evaluate the health safety of the embassy staff. And so while some visas are being granted, they are few and far between. All embassies and consulates, for the most part, are entertaining emergency appointments. And the government has decided there are some cases that qualify for an emergency waiver. These are primarily students throughout the world, also public healthcare workers that would be entering the United States in some form that may contain or mitigate the COVID virus. In other countries, for example, Canada and Germany, we're seeing that they're entertaining e-visas, investor visas, but the backlog is huge. And to get an appointment in any sort of fashion that people used to be accustomed to on a 2, 3, 4, 5 week basis, something like that, is now only being issued on an emergency basis. So you have to have a really compelling reason why you need that person. We see senior level managers of large companies getting visas, but the smaller the company, the less likely a visa is going to be issued. And that is something that, with the potential resurgence of COVID in various countries throughout the world, this can just be an ongoing problem. The ability to get visas is limited at best. And while employees are in the United States, often you can extend their status through USCIS, through a variety of mechanisms. I'm happy to discuss those if anyone has questions. But if they travel abroad, they very well may not be coming back, given the interplay of these four travel bans, being the country specific, the 31 country travel ban, the travel ban at our land borders, travel ban on immigrants, and H, J, and L non-immigrants, and also the closure of the consulates around the world. So that, in essence, probably blew through that fairly quickly, but that is the nature of the problems that companies see who have foreign workers or others who would like to travel abroad. There's significant hurdles to returning. And that's basically all I have on that. I would love to open it up. We've got about another 10 minutes, I see. If you have any questions regarding what I've provided, the information provided, or if you would just have some immigration questions in general, I would be happy to address those at this time. So does anyone have any questions? Would anyone like to use the chat function or to just, there's only about 10 of us right now, so certainly if we'd like to make it a roundtable discussion, we can address any question that you have. I'll try to answer as best I can. Well, going once, going twice, going 3 times. I'd like to thank you all for attending this presentation. And if you have any questions in the future, you can certainly email and we'll try to get those questions answered for you. So I hope you have a great day and take care. Be safe.